The first sound that broke the air that night was not shouting. It was the faint chime of a spoon against porcelain, sharp and polite, the sound of someone pretending everything was fine. The second sound was my son's voice. "You ruined everything." Luke's words struck harder than any slap. The room seemed to shrink around them, walls closing in, air growing heavy. He sat across from me at the dinner table, shoulders tight, knuckles white around a piece of paper he had folded and unfolded so many times the corners were worn soft. I did not need to read it to know it was about money. All of our conversations were about money now, and somehow they all ended the same way, with me becoming the problem. Marian sat beside him, quiet, her fork scraping gently against her plate. She did not look at me, not once. Even silence can sound like agreement when you need it to. Luke threw the paper down between us. "You should have stayed in Bristol. You didn't have to move here. We were doing fine before you came." He said, "we," as if it were a country I no longer belonged to. I looked at the soup in front of me. The reflection of the overhead light wavered with every small movement I made. I could see my hands, the skin loose, the veins rising like faded blue rivers. Once those hands had written his school notes, tied his shoes, held him through fevers. Now they only trembled when I tried to lift the spoon. "I didn't come to ruin anything," I said finally. My voice sounded distant even to me. Luke laughed, but it was hollow, bitter. "You think moving in here was some kind of gift? You sold your house, fine, but we're the ones living with the consequences. There's no space, no privacy. The kids don't even have their own rooms." From upstairs, a faint sound of cartoons bled through the ceiling. My grandson Noah laughed at something, the kind of laugh that still had innocence in it. I wanted to hold onto that sound, but Luke's words drowned it out. "This was supposed to be a new start," he said. "Instead, we're rearranging our whole lives for you." "For you? Not with you." I didn't answer. There was no sentence that could mend the kind of resentment that grows quietly for months until it becomes the only thing left. Marian rose from her chair, gathering plates that were still half full. "Maybe we should all calm down," she murmured, but she didn't look at Luke when she said it. She looked at the wall behind me. When she left the room, the sound of running water came from the kitchen. Luke stared at me for a long moment, then pushed his chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "You don't get it. You'll never get it." Then he walked out. The silence that followed was enormous. It filled every corner of the dining room, every breath I took. I could hear the soft ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint wind pressing against the window. I reached under the table, touched the small recorder hidden beneath the tablecloth, and pressed the button until the light stopped blinking. That tiny red light was the only proof that what just happened was real. Later that night, I stood at the sink washing dishes that were not mine. The water ran hot enough to sting. The glass of the kitchen window reflected my face back at me, pale and tired, framed by the soft yellow glow of the under-cabinet light. Outside, the garden was dark, the outline of the swing set barely visible. I used to love gardens. In Bristol, I had one that smelled of rosemary and old earth, where I could lose an afternoon pruning and humming songs I never finished. I sold it because Luke said this would be easier, safer, better for all of us. He was wrong about all three. I heard footsteps behind me. Marian leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, hair pulled up in that effortless way that always made me feel older than I was. "You don't have to clean, you know," she said softly. "I like keeping busy." She hesitated. Luke didn't mean to shout. "Things have just been stressful." "I know," I said. "Stress can make people say cruel things." She nodded but didn't answer. Then she turned off the light and left me standing there in the half-dark. When I finally went upstairs, I found that someone had pushed my suitcase further into the closet. It was a small thing, but I noticed. My things were always in the way. I sat on the bed, opened my notebook. It was supposed to hold grocery lists, blood pressure readings, reminders for medication. Tonight it became something else. Day 1. My name is Olivia Connor. I sold my house to buy theirs. And today, my son told me I ruined his life. I closed the notebook and placed it on the nightstand. Through the thin wall, I could hear Luke and Marian whispering. The rhythm of their voices was soft at first, then sharper. A chair moved. The bed creaked. I turned my head to the ceiling. Somewhere above me, Noah stirred in his sleep. I used to think silence meant peace. Now I knew better. Silence was a place you got sent when people stopped wanting to hear you. The next morning, the sunlight was too bright. Geneva had a way of pretending to be kind even when it was. I walked into the kitchen, and the smell of coffee hit me instantly. Luke was already gone. Marian was pouring herself a second cup. "Morning," she said without looking up. "Morning. I already made coffee for Luke, but there's tea in the cupboard if you prefer." Her voice was gentle but final. The cupboard, not the pot. A subtle way to remind me that I was outside the circle. I poured the tea, sat by the window. Noah was playing alone in the backyard, using a stick to draw lines in the damp earth. The grass was still heavy with dew. He looked up and waved when he saw me. I waved back, smiling even though the smile didn't reach my chest. For a brief moment, I imagined walking outside, sitting with him, asking about the castle he was building in the dirt. But the thought of Luke's expression if he saw us together stopped me. By lunchtime, Marian asked if I could use the downstairs bathroom from now on. "It's just easier with the kids," she said. By dinner, only 4 plates were set on the table. No one mentioned the missing one. I ate later, quietly standing at the counter while the dishwasher hummed. I washed my plate myself. When I went to bed that night, I found the coffee mug I had used that morning sitting on my dresser. Clean. Someone had carried it upstairs. I didn't know if it was an act of kindness or a warning. 3 days passed like that. Quiet corrections. Small humiliations dressed as helpfulness. I stopped offering to cook, stopped asking about their work. I learned to move through the house like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Then the phone rang. It was late morning. I was folding towels that no one had asked me to fold. "Mrs. Olivia Connor?" "Yes, speaking." "This is Natalie from Bank du Rhône. I'm calling to confirm your home equity loan application." "I'm sorry," she repeated it, slower this time, as if I were the one who might not understand. "We just need the missing tax documents before we can proceed." I could feel my pulse in my throat. "I didn't apply for any loan." A pause stretched across the line. "Perhaps someone else in your household did on your behalf. No one should have. Would you mind confirming your address?" When she read it back, the words landed like stones. "Yes," I said. "That's where I live." I hung up after the call but couldn't remember how long I stood there staring at the folded towels. My hands shook so much that one slipped from the stack and fell to the floor. I left it there. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a small cubicle at the bank. The air smelled of paper and cold metal. Natalie printed the forms, slid them across the desk. There it was, my name, my social number, my signature. But the signature was wrong. The line of the L was too high, the C curled in the wrong direction. Whoever did this knew how I wrote, but not how I moved my hand when I did. I looked up at Natalie. She tried to smile. "We can investigate, of course, but if this isn't your signature, you'll need to file a report." "Please print me a copy," I said. When I stepped outside, the wind cut through my coat. Snow was threatening but not yet falling. Geneva felt sharp around the edges, clean but cruel. I walked home slowly, every step echoing with the sound of Luke's voice in my memory. "You ruined everything." Now I understood what he meant. He wasn't angry because I was there. He was angry because I wasn't supposed to find out. I stood in the hallway outside the dining room with the forged papers in my hand. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that creaks if you breathe too loudly. I could hear Noah upstairs talking to himself, a game in which cars and animals share the same language. Somewhere a heater clicked inside. The world had the softness of winter, and I no longer felt it. I went in and laid the papers on the table. The wood was spotless. Marian kept it that way, as if shine could make a room kinder. Luke came in a few minutes later, tie loosened, eyes already narrowed. He had the look of someone who has prepared an argument on the drive home and is annoyed that he might not get to use it. "What is that?" he asked. I rested my hand on the top sheet, a copy of a loan application. My name, my number, my consent. He was close enough to see all of it. "I got a call from the bank," I said. "Apparently I am applying for a loan to help you." His face changed in a single breath. Shock never vanishes, it rearranges itself into something more useful. He shook his head. "That is not what you think. Then tell me what I should think." He reached for the papers. I did not move my hand. For a moment the two of us were suspended in a small standoff, a tableau of knuckles and breath. He let go first. "We had to," he said. His voice came out fast, thin, the way it did when he was a boy and knew he was cornered. "It is temporary. We will fix it. We just needed a bridge. You know how it is, things pile up. You forged my name. We used your name, we meant to tell you, when I asked." He looked past me toward the darker window. He had no answer and reached for anger instead. "You live here rent-free. We barely have room. Marian is working late, I am balancing everything, and you are folding towels and judging us." I thought of the towels on the chair in my room, the neat white squares stacked like surrendering flags. I thought of Bristol, of the smell of rosemary on my fingers and the sound of my own footsteps in my own house. I thought of the day I told myself that love asks for sacrifices and believed it without asking what love would give back. Marian came in with a pot of overcooked pasta and the effort of a smile. "Everything all right?" she asked, already braced for the answer. "Ask your husband," I said. She set the pot down and stared at the papers. She did not touch them. She understood in a way that did not require words. Luke moved closer to me. There was something in his eyes I did not recognize. Not fury, not shame. Strategy. He had learned to think in terms of leverage. "You owe us," he said quietly. I blinked. For what? For raising me, for being alive. I let the words land between us. He believed them. That was the worst part. I slid the papers toward him with 2 fingers. I spoke slowly, the way I used to when I wanted him to hear me the first time. "I loved you before you knew what love was. I gave you a home, and when that was not enough, I sold it to buy you another. You will not take my name, not like this." He laughed, small and cruel. "Your name is not worth what you think it is." "Then why did you need it?" I asked. His jaw worked. He did not have another laugh. He lunged for the papers, gathered them in a rough stack, and in the movement his shoulder bumped the recorder hidden under the table edge. It rattled against the wood. He looked at me. For the first time all day, he looked frightened. "What was that?" "Proof," I said. Marian set the pot down harder than she meant to. The lid rang like a bell and then settled. "You recorded us," Luke said. His voice climbed, then cracked. "You recorded me. Sometimes the world does not believe mothers," I said. Marian put her hands flat on the table. "Olivia," she said slowly, "what is it that you want?" "I want truth," I said. "And I want peace." It is astonishing how often those two cannot share a room. Luke whispered something I could not catch and pressed his palms into his eyes. He stayed like that long enough for me to wonder if he would speak again. When he dropped his hands, his face was tight and blotched. He pushed his chair back and stood. "Do you know what would make all of this easier?" he said. "If you were not here." Marian's head snapped toward him. "Luke." "No," he said, "say it. Everyone is thinking it. If she were gone, this would be simpler." He did not say dead. He did not have to. The room did not move. Even the air held itself very still. I felt a calm pass through me that did not belong to the moment. It was larger than this kitchen, older than this house. It had the slow confidence of a tide. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" he snapped. "For giving me a full sentence on record." He realized it after the words were out. He had said them to wound, and I received them like a gift. His face twisted. "You think this is a game," he said. "My life is not a game. I am trying to keep my family together." "Your family would not exist in this house if I had not sold mine," I said. "You did that for yourself." He was right in a way. I did it because I was tired of eating dinner alone. I did it because I wanted to hear my grandson laugh in the next room. I did it because I believed in promises that sounded warm even as they cooled in the air. Marian took the pot back to the stove. The lid clattered. The sound felt strangely ceremonial, like the end of a service no one found holy. We ate in a careful silence. Forks lifted and lowered. Glasses were filled and emptied. The children stayed upstairs and did not know why no one called them down for dessert. When Luke stood to leave, he gathered the papers in too much of a hurry, jammed them into a drawer that stuck halfway, then forced it shut. He walked past me without looking. I heard the side door open and close. The lock clicked. Marian began to stack the plates. I rose to help her. She let me take 2 and then pulled the others away. "You do not have to," she said. "I do not mind. That is not the point." She stared at the sink like it might supply better words. Eventually she said, "I never wanted it to be like this." "Neither did I." She rinsed a glass and set it in the rack. "I am sorry about the bathroom. It is just that the children are up and down and it is a lot." "I know," I said. "Small rules feel like safety when bigger things are falling apart." She turned. There was something like gratitude in her face and something like fear. "Be careful," she said. "With what?" "With him. He is my son." "Exactly." She left me with the dishes and the layered meanings of a simple word. That night I listened to the recording 3 times. His voice grew flatter each time, like a stamp now dry from use. I copied the file to my computer and to a small drive I kept in the lining of my cardigan. I slid the recorder back into its hiding place and reset the battery. Then I opened my notebook. Day 4. The bank believes me. The paper believes me. The recorder believes me. My son does not. Tomorrow I will stop asking him to. I slept an hour at most. Dreams came and went like trains in bad weather. In one of them I was in my old garden and the lilac tree bent close and whispered that I had waited long enough. The morning brought a sky the color of milk. Noah came down in pajamas patterned with little whales and climbed into my lap without asking. His head fit beneath my chin the way Luke's had at that age. I closed my eyes and breathed in hair that smelled like sleep and sugar and the soft world of a child who believes any room can be safe if his grandmother is there. Marian watched us from the doorway, arms crossed but not unkind. "He woke early," she said. "He wanted you." I nodded. "You can sit," I said. She did not. After a moment, she went to the kettle and set it on. The sound of water heating filled the small space between us. Luke came down late, eyes bruised with fatigue. He stopped when he saw Noah in my lap, then looked away. "Good morning," he said to the room. "Morning," Marian answered. She poured him coffee. She did not ask me if I wanted any. I set Noah down gently and went to the sink. The morning papers were on the counter, tucked under a supermarket flyer. While I rinsed a cup, I said in a voice as ordinary as weather, "I will be going out today." "Where?" Luke asked. "To see a friend?" He snorted. "Since when do you have friends here?" "Since I arrived," I said. "You just did not notice." He left the room. The air felt lighter. I took the bus to a street near the river, to a cafe where the pastries were too beautiful and the coffee came with a small glass of water as if to apologize for its strength. Hargreaves was already there, a coat neatly folded on the back of the chair, his reading glasses balanced on the end of his nose. When he saw me, he stood. He still had the good manners of a man who knows how to end conversations and begin them again 20 years later. "Olivia," he said, "it is good to see you even under sad circumstances." "They are less sad than you think," I said. He listened as I told him about the call, the papers, the house. He asked questions the way good lawyers do, quietly, relentlessly. When I finished, he tapped his glass with one finger. "The house is in your name alone," he said. "The new one. The mortgage is yours, but the deed is not shared. Do you remember why you left it that way?" "Insurance," I said. "My age was better for the premium. We were going to change it later." "You never did." "No," he folded his hands. "Then you have more leverage than they do. You also have evidence." He paused. "Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet." "What do you want?" "Breathing space," I said. "And a map." He nodded. "We can put a hold on anything in process. We can alert the bank to potential fraud. We can document everything you have and create copies. As for the rest, we will move at your speed." He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a card with his number and a key that had never belonged to me. "A safety deposit box," he said. "Use it as if it always was yours." I put the recorder on the table between us. He raised an eyebrow. "You came prepared." "I always do. I just stopped announcing it." We parted at the corner where the wind funneled itself into a sharper cold. He raised a hand, then turned and merged into the small crowd of lunch hours and errands. I stood still for a moment and let the city move around me. It felt like standing in a river. I thought of Luke's voice, of the exact moment it crossed a line. I thought of Marian's warning spoken in a kitchen full of steam. I thought of the house I bought and the home I had hoped it would become, and I knew, with the kind of certainty that does not shout, that every kindness I offered next would be deliberate and that every step would be away from the woman they believed they had. I went home and made a list. Not of groceries, not of chores, a list of small exits, one key at a time, one drawer at a time, one piece of myself returned to myself. At dinner, Luke tried hard to be pleasant. His voice was careful, his smile straight and thin. He asked about the weather. He mentioned a television show none of us watched. He did not meet my eyes. Marian set an extra plate without comment and poured me water as if it were a treaty. I was polite. I ate what was served. I stacked my plate neatly when I was done. Before I went upstairs, I touched the table edge where the recorder rested, invisible to them and bright as a lighthouse to me. I thought of seas and the way you can drown in a shallow bowl if you're tired enough. In my room, I packed a small bag that did not look like a bag. A scarf heavy with winter. A book of poems old enough to smell like an attic. The drive with the recording, the copy of the loan application. My passport. A framed photo of a lilac tree I had once believed I would die beside. I placed the bag in the closet and sat on the bed. Outside, the streetlights came on and painted the walls a gentler color. I opened the notebook and wrote with a hand that did not tremble. Day 5. I am done asking for kindness. I will give it on my own terms or not at all. Tomorrow I will begin to move the pieces they do not see. I closed the book, turned off the light, and lay in the dark listening to the soft breath of a house that did not know it was about to tell the truth. When you live with people who do not see you, every sound becomes sharper. The click of a light switch, the cupboard door closing, the rhythm of footsteps that pause just outside your room. Those small sounds tell you what you are worth in a house that no longer wants you. For days after the confrontation, I heard Luke and Marian moving around me the way one moves around a sleeping animal, quietly, carefully, with resentment hidden behind courtesy. They did not mention the papers. They did not mention the recording. But there was a new kind of order in the house. Luke left earlier for work, Marian cooked smaller portions, and the children were told to play upstairs. I kept to myself. I cleaned, wrote, folded, observed. That was how I survived classrooms full of restless teenagers in Bristol for 20 years, by watching before reacting. Observation gives you control. It makes silence useful. One afternoon, I took Noah for a walk while Marian worked from home. The sky hung low over Geneva, gray but gentle. We walked by the lake and he told me about the invisible dragon that lived under the bridge. I pretended to be scared, and he laughed until his breath fogged the air. For a moment, the world was still kind. When we returned, Marian was on the phone. Her voice was hushed but urgent. I could hear my name twice before she noticed me. She ended the call quickly and smiled, the kind of smile that ends too soon. "Work?" I asked. "Something like that," she said. That night Luke came home late again. He spoke to Marian in the hallway, and their voices rose, fell, and finally dropped into the soft murmur of exhaustion. I sat by my window and wrote in my notebook, Day 6. He is angry at her now. The disease spreads. I closed the book and looked at the reflection of the streetlights in the glass. For the first time, I wondered what would happen if I simply disappeared. Not dead, just gone. The next morning, Luke was already gone when I came down. Marian stood at the sink staring at her phone. She startled when she saw me. "There is mail for you," she said quickly, on the counter. The envelope bore the seal of the bank. I opened it slowly, expecting more trouble. Instead, there was confirmation of the report I had filed with Hargreaves's help. The fraudulent application had been flagged, the process frozen. Relief came quietly, like air returning to a lung. But underneath it was something harder, something that looked like resolve. Marian glanced at the paper. "Is everything all right?" "Better than before," I said. She hesitated. "He will be furious when he finds out." "I know, do you want me to?" She stopped herself. "No," I said, "let him find out on his own." That afternoon, I recorded my own voice for the first time. Not his, not hers, mine. I wanted to hear what I sounded like when no one interrupted. I said my name, my address, the date. Then, they think I am weak. They think I will break quietly. They forget that silence has memory. When I played it back, the voice did not sound like mine. It sounded stronger. That evening, Luke burst through the door earlier than usual. The children ran to him and then stopped when they saw his face. He did not speak to them. He went straight to the kitchen where I was slicing vegetables. "The bank called me," he said. "You froze the loan." I kept my knife steady. "They froze the loan because it was not mine." He slammed the counter. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" "Yes, I have stopped a crime." He stared at me, breathing hard. "You want to ruin us, don't you?" "No," I said, "you are doing that by yourself." He took a step toward me, then stopped. For a moment, his anger looked like fear wearing the wrong face. He left without another word. When the door closed, Marian came in from the hallway, eyes wide. "You shouldn't provoke him," she whispered. "I am not provoking him. I am protecting myself. He can be cruel, so can life," I said. That night, I copied every recording, every document onto a second drive. I hid it under the floorboard beneath my bed. Then I packed a second small bag, lighter than the first. I did not plan to leave yet, but I liked knowing I could. The next morning, the house was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. It belonged to me now. The day after the loan was frozen, I began to listen differently. I let the house speak. It told me things in its own language. A cupboard door slammed a little too hard meant Luke had read an email he did not like. A drawer shut softly meant Marian was trying not to wake a sleeping worry. The hallway carried voices as if it were a shallow river. If I stood very still, I could catch entire sentences drifting past like fallen leaves. I moved lightly through rooms I had paid for and no longer owned in any way that mattered. I dusted the mantel where no photographs of me stood. I straightened the books Luke never opened. I watered the plant on the windowsill that reached toward the pale January sun with a stubbornness I admired. I also set down the small recorder in places where truth tended to pause, under the rim of a fruit bowl, between two books on the lowest shelf. Inside my knitting bag, open on the sofa as if I had just stepped away. At first, all I caught were domestic notes. Milk, rent, school drop-off. The polite choreography of a family pretending to glide while their feet scrabbled for balance beneath the surface. Then the tempo changed. Voices sharpened, paused, began again. "She will never know," Luke said in the living room while I folded towels in the hallway. "She barely checks email. She does not understand half of it." "We cannot keep doing this," Marian said. "It is dangerous. It is already done." There was a long silence. I could hear the children in their room upstairs, the rise and fall of a cartoon-themed song, the low hum of the refrigerator. Then Marian again, small but pointed. "Do you ever think about what you are doing to her?" "We are doing this because of her," he replied. "She moved in. She changed everything. She owes us." The word owed sounded like a lock snapping into place. I listened to the recording that night sitting on the floor of my room with my back against the closet. The carpet smelled faintly of detergent and something lemony. The file was crisp and cold in my ears. I pressed pause. I pressed play. I pressed pause again. I looked at my hands and imagined them opening a door and not looking back. The next morning, I took the bus to a small post office not far from the river and rented a box. The clerk asked if I wanted a number easy to remember. I told her to give me the number no one else wanted. She smiled and gave me a key that felt heavier than it should have. I liked that. From there, I walked to a credit union on a quiet street and opened an account under my maiden name. The woman who helped me had kind eyes and a ring with a small scratch on the band that caught the light when she typed. She asked about transfers, and I told her I would handle them myself. I did not tell her that I would do it slowly, like a careful breath, a little each day until the act of leaving felt as ordinary as washing a cup. When I returned, Marian was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers and a pen that she kept uncapping and capping. She looked up with an expression that tried for lightness and fell short. "How was your walk?" she asked. "Useful," I said. She nodded and then lowered her voice. "He is going to be worse now." "Worse how?" "More careful, more cruel." I poured water from the tap. The glass fogged slightly in my hand. Cruelty was a language I understood. It is never fluent at first. It stammers, then finds its voice. That night I heard Luke on the phone from the dining room. His voice was deeper, purposeful. "Use her name again," he said. "She never checks anything." "No, the signature is fine. It worked before. Do it the same way." Something slipped inside me when I heard that. Not a bone, something older. A belief, perhaps. The belief that the child you raised would at least try to be decent even when life pressed him hard. I played that recording 3 times. On the third, I no longer heard his voice. I heard mine, steady and far away, telling me that the map had drawn itself and I only needed to follow it. The following day, the kitchen became a place of small punishments. The coffee was always gone by the time I came down. The sugar jar was moved to the highest shelf. My mug traveled from the cupboard to my dresser and back again. The remote control disappeared for hours and returned only when the children wanted a film with their mother. My favorite blanket was missing. Marian said she had donated a sack to a shop for charity and perhaps the blanket had been inside. She said it with the right shade of regret. I could not prove otherwise. I wrote in my notebook. Day 8. They are trying to remind me I live by permission. I will remind them that I live by choice. In the afternoon, I called Hargreaves from the corner of the park where pigeons argued over crumbs with more honesty than most people argue over money. He listened, always listening. I could hear a clock in his office ticking with the unreasonable confidence of clocks. "We will file the fraud complaint today," he said. "We will send notice to the bank and to the firm that submitted the application. If there is a third party, we will discover the name. It will slow them in every direction." "Good," I said. "Do you need a place to stay?" he asked. "Not yet. Soon." Soon, I agreed, and the word felt like opening a window without anyone noticing. That evening, while I sat on the rug with Noah building a crooked castle out of wooden blocks, Luke stood in the doorway and watched us with a face that worked too hard to look casual. Noah waved at him with a knife in his hand. Luke did not wave back. He stood there for a moment, then said, as if he had rehearsed it, "I am sorry for how I spoke." I nodded. "Thank you." He stepped into the room and crouched beside the castle. He pushed one block gently to show where a tower should go. His voice softened. "We all say things we do not mean when we are tired. You know how it is." I placed a block over his and smiled. "I know exactly how it is." After Noah went up to bed, Luke approached me in the kitchen while Marian loaded the dishwasher. He kept his tone easy and his eyes alert. He spoke about refinancing as if we were partners in a business venture. He asked about my plans for the week. He thanked me for folding the laundry. He did not mention the loan. He did not mention the recorder. He knew, and I knew he knew, and still the dance continued. When I was alone later, I took from my dresser a small manila envelope that had traveled with me from Bristol. It contained copies of the deed, the tax documents, the insurance forms. The paper felt alive in my hands. Owner of record, Olivia M. Connor. No cosigner. No joint ownership. I read the lines twice, and then pressed my palm flat against them until my skin warmed the page. I was not trying to convince the paper. I was trying to remind myself. The next morning, I took a taxi to a storage facility 2 towns over. The man at the desk wore a beanie and smiled with half his mouth like someone who knew when to keep other people's secrets. I rented a unit the size of a small walk-in closet. I carried in a box of items so ordinary they would never interest a thief. A pie dish, a photograph of a tree, a book with a broken spine, my husband's cufflinks in a case the color of dark cherry. These things would not make me rich or safe, but they made me feel returned to myself. When I came back, Marian was on the phone again, pacing the kitchen. She did not notice me in the doorway. Her back was to me, her voice low. "Yes," she said, "I understand. But if they file, I do not know how we keep this going. You said it would be fine. You said no one checks the details." She paused, listening. Her voice turned brittle. "Do not talk to me about risk now." She ended the call and only then saw me. She blinked as if I had materialized. "I am making soup," she said. "Would you like the first bowl?" "Yes," I said. "Thank you." We sat at the table together while the soup steamed in front of us. For a while we ate without speaking. The spoon touched the bowl with that small chime I had learned to hate. Finally, she set her spoon down. "I used to think that love meant doing whatever it takes to keep a family together," she said. "I am not sure anymore." "Love means telling the truth even when it tears the fabric," I said. "Otherwise, you are only mending a lie." She looked at me for a long time. Then her eyes filled in a way that made her look more like herself. "I did not know what he planned at first," she said. "When I realized, I thought it would be temporary." Then I realized temporary is the word people use when they do not want to admit to forever. The children's laughter drifted from the other room. She wiped her eyes quickly and stood. "I will make more tea." That night brought the real sentence. It was late. The house had gone silent in that way it does when everyone has accepted that tomorrow will be no better. I was closing my door when Luke's voice came from the hallway, low and sharp. If she just died, we would not have to deal with any of this. He did not know I was there. He did not know I had the recorder in my hand. It switched on with a single soft click. The red light blinked and held. There was a pause, and then Marian answered in a voice that broke me in a different way because it was tired, not cruel. "Do not say that." He did not repeat it. He did not need to. Silence can carry a sentence longer than any echo. I closed my door and sat down in the dark. I listened to the sentence again, then again. I felt nothing and everything at once. My mind was clear in the way air feels clear after thunder has rolled through and taken the vowels out of every word. I placed the recorder on the table beside my notebook and wrote, "Day 10. I have the line that draws the map." He spoke it in my house with my walls and my air. I am done being present for the cruelty he cannot say to my face. The next morning I woke before dawn, the sky a soft gray cloth stretched over the city. I made tea in a quiet kitchen and watched steam rise and disappear. Steam understands how to leave without being chased. I admired that. I pulled the first small suitcase from the closet and set it open on the bed. I filled it with what mattered and left out what did not. There is a kind of relief in admitting how little you truly need. When Noah knocked on my door, I closed the case with my palm and smiled in a way I hoped he would remember. He climbed into my lap and asked if dragons could swim. I told him yes, of course, the best ones could. In the afternoon, I walked to the bank and made the first transfer into my new account. The number on the receipt was not large, but it was mine. I folded the paper and slid it into my pocket as if it were a small bird I meant to release later. On my way back, the winter light struck the lake and turned it into a sheet of white fire. I stopped at the railing and let the cold bite my cheeks until they burned. In my reflection, I did not look like a victim. I looked like a woman who had finally remembered her original language. When I reached the house, I did not go inside right away. I stood on the porch and looked at the door I had opened so many times with hope as a key. Then I took a breath and went in as if crossing a border. That evening, I cooked. I made a stew that smelled of onions and thyme and the kind of patience I used to be proud of. I set the table for 5 and called the children down and asked Marian to sit and ask Luke if he would say grace the way he used to when he played at being gentle. He stared at me, then at the bowls, and then at his hands. He muttered a sentence that never reached heaven. We ate. We pretended. We performed a version of family that might have convinced a stranger. After the dishes were done, I opened the drawer where he had jammed the papers and laid, in their place, a single folded note. Tomorrow at noon. Then I went upstairs and slept. I dreamed of a box made of dark wood sitting in the center of a room that used to feel like mine, and in the dream the box did not contain punishment. It contained proof. It contained a key none of them were expecting. It contained the exact silence I had been saving, the kind that ends a story without needing a raised voice. When I woke, I was not afraid. Morning arrived without color. The sky was white, and the world seemed undecided about being alive. I woke before anyone else, packed the second suitcase, the smaller one, and placed it near the door. I had no plan for today except to be ready if a plan decided to find me. The children were still asleep. Their laughter existed only as a memory in the hallway. I moved quietly through the kitchen, making tea, the the sound of the kettle the only heartbeat left in that room. On the counter lay the note I had written, tomorrow at noon. Luke had seen it by now, but he had not mentioned it. That meant he was thinking, and thinking was always his most dangerous state. I sat at the table and wrote in my notebook, Day 11. The house has begun to listen back. When they woke, Marian acted as if the evening before had been erased. She asked whether I had slept, whether the children could play outside after school. Her voice was soft, but it trembled like something new and afraid of breaking. Luke came down in his shirt and tie, face already red from shaving too fast. He avoided my eyes, kissed the top of Noah's head, and left without touching his breakfast. The silence he left behind tasted of metal. After they were gone, I took the small recorder from the drawer and placed it on the table. I pressed play and listened to his sentence again, if she just died, and I let the sound wash over me until it became only rhythm, no meaning left in it. Then I pressed stop, slipped the recorder into my coat pocket, and left the house. Geneva's air was sharp with cold. I walked without hurry toward the lawyer's office, counting my steps. Each one landed like punctuation in a story I was learning to tell differently. Hargreaves greeted me with the same calm kindness as before. He looked at the suitcase and raised an eyebrow. Traveling? Preparing, I said. He gestured for me to sit. I read the bank's response. They are cooperating fully. If your son or his wife attempt another application, they will be flagged. I nodded. Good. You could press charges now. I could, I said, but sometimes patience makes the blade sharper. He leaned back, studying me. You were never one for drama, Olivia. You were always methodical. Drama wastes time, I said. Method saves it. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that means respect mixed with worry. If you ever need a witness or a friend, I'm available. I placed the drive with the recordings on his desk. Keep this safe. It may not be evidence yet, but it's truth. He slid it into a folder. Stood. When I left his office, the clouds had shifted. Light moved over the rooftops like a thin promise. I found myself walking toward the train station. I did not buy a ticket. I just stood among the travelers and listened to the announcements echo through the hall. Departures, arrivals. Every voice spoke of movement, and for the first time in months, I felt part of something larger than the walls of that house. By the time I returned, Marian was waiting in the living room. The children were upstairs. She had her hands folded tightly in her lap, a bruise of worry on her face. He knows, she said. Of course he does. He says you're trying to destroy him. I am not destroying him, I said. I am refusing to be destroyed. She nodded, eyes glassy. He says he'll talk to the bank himself. He can talk, I said. Talking is free. Then, softly, she asked, Are you going to leave? I don't know, I said. Maybe I already have. That night, Luke didn't come home until late. The clock ticked past midnight before I heard the car in the drive. He came in quietly, thinking everyone was asleep. I was sitting in the kitchen with the lights off. The recorder lay on the table beside my tea. He froze when he saw me. We need to talk, I said. About what? About what you said. His mouth twitched. People say things they do mean. Some things are too exact to be mistakes. He didn't answer. I could smell the cold on his coat, the faint trace of whiskey under his breath. Sit down, I said. He did, but slowly. He looked at the recorder. Is it on? No, I said. Would you like it to be? He laughed once, short and bitter. You think you're the hero here? No, I think I'm awake. He rubbed his face. You can't win, Mum. Even if you take everything back legally, you'll still be alone. Is that what you want? Alone and free, I said, is still better than surrounded and erased. He shook his head, stood, and walked out. The front door closed hard enough to rattle the glasses on the shelf. I waited until I heard the car start, then I turned on the recorder. Day 12, I whispered. He finally knows I am not afraid. I switched it off and smiled at the darkness. The next move was mine. The morning after our talk, the air inside the house felt heavier, as if it knew what was coming. Even the walls seemed to listen. The light that came through the curtains was pale and nervous, and the smell of last night's stew still hung in the kitchen. I brewed tea slowly, the way one does when waiting for something to happen. The table was bare except for my notebook. I opened it and wrote a single sentence, Day 13. When you decide to stop being silent, the world begins to rearrange itself. Luke didn't come down for breakfast. Marian moved through the kitchen quietly, avoiding my eyes. The children sensed it too. They ate in whispers. There's a kind of tension that even small hearts can feel, though they can't name it yet. After the children left for school, I finally spoke. Did he sleep here? Marian hesitated, then shook her head. He stayed somewhere else last night. Where? I don't know, she said, but the tremor in her voice told me she did. I finished my tea. You should take the children to your sister for a few days. She looked up sharply. Why? Because storms don't always start with thunder. I said. Sometimes they start with paperwork. She didn't ask what I meant. She only nodded slowly, her hand tightening around the cup. By noon, I was in my lawyer's office again. Hargreaves listened as I told him everything, Luke's threats, the recordings, the way he'd said if she just died. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned forward and folded his hands. "It's enough," he said. "We can file. Fraud, coercion, possibly attempted exploitation." "Not yet," I said. His eyebrows rose. "Why not?" "Because truth isn't enough," I said. "People need to feel it before they believe it." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're setting a stage." "I'm setting a mirror," I said. "He needs to see himself before the world does." When I returned home, Marion and the children were gone. A note lay on the counter. "We're at my sister. I'll call tomorrow. Please be careful." The house was silent in a way that felt deliberate. The kind of silence that waits. I walked into Luke's office, the one he'd claimed as his workspace. The smell of his cologne clung to the air, mixed with coffee and paper. On the desk was his laptop, open, its blue light pulsing faintly like a heart under a sheet. I knew his password. Of course I did. He used the same one he had since university, the name of his first dog and the year he graduated. Nostalgia makes people predictable. The screen came alive. Emails, transactions, messages, one folder labeled BD Holdings. I opened it. Dozens of files filled the screen, loan applications, contracts, letters of approval, all stamped with my name. The dates span months. He had started before I even moved in. It wasn't one forgery. It was a system. My chest tightened, but it wasn't fear. It was clarity. I copied everything onto a drive, then placed the laptop exactly where it had been. I wiped the desk gently with a cloth. When I left the room, it looked untouched. That evening, he came home. His hair was wet from rain, his coat heavy with it. He hung it on the rack without a word and walked straight into his office. I stood in the hallway and listened. After a few seconds, the chair scraped back, then the sound of drawers opening, papers shifting, a sharp curse. Another. He came out fast, his face pale. "Did you touch my things?" "No, you're lying." "Am I?" His hands clenched. "You have no idea what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," I said. He took a step toward me. "You're going to ruin this family." "I'm saving what's left of it." "You're pathetic," he spat. "You couldn't live without us. You sold your house because you were lonely." I smiled, calm and slow. "I sold it because I knew one day I'd need the money to bury something." He stared at me, confused by the calm. Then he turned away, muttering, pacing, like an animal that realizes the trap isn't outside the cage but in the air itself. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the lights low and watched the shadow of the clock hands crawl across the wall. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed love could fix anything, the one who apologized for taking up space. I no longer recognized her. At sunrise, I printed every document from his laptop and placed them in a brown envelope. I wrote one sentence on the front in black ink: "For the police, if I disappear." I left it on Hargreaves's desk before he arrived. When I came home, the front door was unlocked. Luke's car was in the drive. He was in the kitchen, staring at the window as if it had insulted him. He turned when I entered. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" "About what happens next." "Next is easy," I said. "You tell the truth and we all get to keep breathing." He laughed, but it sounded like something breaking. "You think they'll believe you? You're old, confused, you record people, you write in a diary like a child. You think that's evidence." "I don't need them to believe," I said softly. "I need them to listen." He stepped closer. His voice dropped. "You should be careful. Accidents happen. Old women fall. People forget to lock doors." I looked at him for a long moment. "You shouldn't talk like that in front of the walls," I said. "What?" "They remember things," I said. "Especially when they've been listening." He stared, unsure whether to laugh or fear me. Then he left the room. The sound of his footsteps faded upstairs. When I was sure he was gone, I opened my notebook again. Day 14. The stage is ready. The mirror is clean. Outside, the wind rose and touched the windows with invisible fingers. The sky darkened, heavy with the promise of snow. Tomorrow at noon would come soon, and I was ready. Noon came quietly, the way endings often do. The sky was pale, a flat canvas of gray that made the snow glow brighter against the earth. I sat by the window, tea in hand, watching flakes drift and disappear against the glass. The house was still. Marion and the children were gone, and Luke hadn't yet returned from wherever he had decided to hide from his own reflection. The clock ticked past 11:45 when I rose, went to the kitchen, and opened the drawer by the sink. Inside was the small black recorder, its red light unblinking. I pressed play just once to check the sound. Then I slipped it into my coat pocket. My other hand rested on the small drive I had taken from his computer. His voice, his documents, his guilt, all confined to a silver chip no longer than my thumb. Truth was lighter than I expected it to be. I stepped outside. The snow greeted me gently. Each breath came out like smoke, fading almost before I could see it. The taxi waited at the curb, its engine humming softly, the driver tapping his fingers on the steering wheel to a song only he could hear. "To the station," I said. The drive took 10 minutes. Geneva blurred past in muted colors, the way cities do when you have decided to leave them behind. When we stopped, I paid the driver, stepped onto the platform, and walked straight to the small cafe near track 4. Hargreaves was already there, punctual as ever, a paper folded beside his cup of coffee. "You're early," he said. "I've been waiting a long time," I replied. He nodded. "It's all ready. The file will go to the authorities this afternoon. I've arranged for a courier to deliver the physical copies. You'll have distance when the news breaks." I took a seat across from him. "Good." He studied me for a moment. "You're calm." I learned calm in the places where panic doesn't help. He smiled faintly, then slid a manila envelope across the table. "Your new documents, a bank account in your name alone, a rental property, small, quiet, by the lake. You can stay there as long as you need." I placed the envelope in my bag. "And him. He'll find himself under investigation before sunset. Fraud, falsification of identity, misuse of funds. It will take time, but the case is strong." I nodded, though my pulse beat faster. "He won't take it quietly." "No," Hargreaves said. "Men like him never do, but he can't touch what he can't find." The train horn sounded once, low and deep, rolling across the station like a promise. I stood. "Thank you," I said. "Be careful," he replied. "And remember, truth doesn't always save you, but it sets the right fire." I walked to the platform and watched the train slide in, sleek and silver, its doors opening with a sigh. I could have boarded. I could have left Geneva, started again somewhere where no one knew my name. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was to end this where it began. I let the train leave without me. When it disappeared into the white horizon, I turned back and walked to the payphone near the exit. I dialed Luke's number. He answered on the second ring. His voice was sharp. "Where are you?" "Listening," I said. He laughed, cold and brittle. "You think this is over? You think a few papers and a recording can ruin me?" "No," I said softly. "You'll ruin yourself. I'm just making sure the lights are on when you do it." "You shouldn't have done this," he hissed. "You don't know what's coming." "Oh, I do," I said. "Noon has a way of keeping its promises." He started to speak again, but I hung up. The sound of the receiver settling back into place was oddly satisfying. I walked back toward the taxi stand. My reflection followed me in the glass of shop windows, older, steadier, freer. I didn't look like a woman being chased anymore. I looked like a woman who had already arrived. When I got home, the first thing I noticed was the open front door. The cold had slipped inside, pooling across the floor. Papers littered the hallway, drawers yanked open. Luke had been looking for something. "Olivia." He called from upstairs. His voice was a knife wrapped in velvet. "I'm here," I said. He appeared at the top of the stairs, breath heavy, eyes wild. "Where is it?" "Where is what?" "You know what." "I know many things," I said. "Be specific." He came down the stairs, step by step, each one loud. His hand gripped the railing too tightly. "The drive, the papers, you think you can outsmart me?" "I don't think," I said. "I plan." He stopped at the bottom step. "You ruined my life. You ruined your own." "I just kept the receipts." His jaw tightened. "Give me what I want." I took the recorder from my pocket and held it up. "You already gave it to me." He froze. Recognition flickered in his eyes, the awareness of all the things he'd said that could never be unsaid. Then he lunged. I stepped back, quick but calm, and the movement sent the recorder sliding from my hand onto the floor. It landed with a small click, and the red light blinked on. The sound of his footsteps filled the room, heavy, frantic, recorded forever. He stopped, breathing hard. "You're not going to the police." "No," I said. "They're coming here." "What?" "Right about now." As if summoned by the words, a knock sounded at the door, firm, measured, official. Luke's face drained of color. "This isn't over," he whispered. "It is," I said. "You just haven't accepted it yet." He turned toward the back door, but the sound of another knock froze him in place. I walked to the front, opened it, and let the 2 officers in. "Mrs. Connor?" one asked. "Yes. We'd like to speak to your son, Luke Connor." "He's right there," I said, stepping aside. Luke's mouth opened, but no words came out. The officers spoke to him quietly, their tone calm but firm. He didn't resist. He just stared at me, bewildered, betrayed by a truth he had built himself. When they led him outside, the snow had started again. It fell softly on his shoulders, melting against the warmth of a man who thought himself untouchable. Inside, I closed the door and leaned against it. The silence that followed was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of something finished. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself tea, and sat at the table. The house felt different, lighter, cleaner, as if it had been waiting for this breath of honesty. I opened my notebook one last time. Day 15. The house she bought is hers again. The ghosts have names now, and they've all been spoken aloud. I closed the book, took a slow sip, and watched the snow fall. For the first time, it felt like peace. For 2 days after they took Luke away, the house spoke only in whispers. Doors stayed closed. The floors stopped creaking at night. Even the refrigerator hummed more softly, as though it understood that quiet was the only decent thing left to do. I moved through the rooms like a caretaker of an old church after the congregation has gone. Every corner held a ghost of conversation, but the ghosts were polite now. The air smelled faintly of snow and something cleaner, justice maybe. On the morning of the third day, Marian returned with the children. They came in cautiously, the way people enter a room where something sacred or terrible has happened. The children ran upstairs first, calling for their toys. Marian stood in the doorway and looked at me. "I heard," she said softly. I nodded. "They'll hold him until the investigation's complete." She looked down at her hands. "He called me from the station. He said you set him up." "I didn't set him up," I said. "He built his own trap. I just turned on the light." She nodded, but her eyes filled. "He's still their father." "And you're still their mother," I said. "That's why I left your names out of everything." Her gaze flicked up, surprised. "You did?" "I told them he acted alone," I said. "That he forged the signatures without your knowledge." They believed me. A long silence passed between us, and then she whispered, "You didn't have to protect me." "I know," I said, "but I wanted to." She covered her face with her hands and sobbed quietly, the kind of crying that comes after holding everything inside for too long. I walked to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. When she lifted her head again, her face was wet but calm. "What will you do now?" "I'll stay here a little while," I said. "The house needs company." She looked around at the walls, the furniture, the light falling through the curtains. "It feels different," she said. "Lighter." "Yes," I said. "Houses breathe differently when lies leave them." That evening, after she'd put the children to bed, we sat at the kitchen table together. The kettle hissed softly between us. She stared into her cup, lost in thought. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked finally. "Buying this house?" "No," she said. "Everything that led here." I thought about that for a while. "Regret is a luxury for people who had choices," I said. "I had love, and sometimes love makes fools of us until it teaches us how to survive." She nodded, understanding in the quiet way only women who have lost illusions can. We spoke of simple things after that: the children's school, the winter market, whether the lilacs in the garden would bloom again in spring. For the first time, it felt like a real conversation, not a performance of peace. When she went upstairs, I stayed behind, alone with the night. I took the recorder from my pocket and placed it on the table. The small red light blinked once before I switched it off for good. I didn't need proof anymore. The truth had already done its work. 2 weeks later, the first letter came. It bore an official seal and too many words written in a tone that tried to sound sympathetic. Pending charges, ongoing investigation, statement requested. I read it once, then placed it in a drawer. 3 days after that came a second envelope, this one handwritten. The script was Luke's. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Mum," it began, "you've always believed you were right. Maybe you are. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just wanted to build something for us. You took everything away. But I don't hate you. I never could." The rest of the page was blank. I folded the letter carefully and set it in the notebook beside the last entry I'd written. For a moment, I considered writing again, but there was nothing left to say. Outside, snow had begun to melt. Water dripped from the eaves, tapping rhythmically against the stones. A week later, Marian and I took the children to the park by the lake. The sky was pale blue, and for the first time in months, sunlight reached every corner of the water. The children ran ahead, their laughter cutting through the air like bells. Marian looked at me. "They've been sleeping better," she said. "They don't ask about him as much." "That's good," I said. She hesitated. "Do you think he'll come back?" I watched the lake shimmer under the sun. "People like him don't return, they circle, they wait, but they don't come back." She shivered. "Do you think he'll hurt us?" "No," I said, "not anymore." I didn't tell her why I was sure, because 2 days earlier I'd received another letter. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. "Don't worry, I'm gone, take care of them. You always were stronger than me." And beneath those words, a single line in handwriting I would have recognized anywhere: "Tell the house I'm sorry." That night, after everyone was asleep, I went out into the garden. The snow had melted away, leaving the soil dark and soft. I stood by the lilac tree and whispered to the air, "He said he's sorry." A breeze moved through the branches, carrying the faint scent of spring. For a heartbeat, I almost believed the house sighed back. I smiled. Then I went inside, closed the door, and locked it, not out of fear, but out of completion. The past could knock all it wanted. It no longer lived here. When I sat down later with my tea, I opened the notebook one final time. The pages were nearly full. Day 30. The house she bought has forgiven itself. And so have I closed it gently, set it on the table, and let the quiet settle. Outside, the first bird of spring sang a single clear note through the fading dark. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need to write what came next. It's strange how peace can begin to sound suspicious. 2 months passed after Luke's disappearance, and the house became quiet in a way that almost felt too perfect. The walls stopped echoing. The floors no longer complained. Even the garden seemed to grow politely, lilacs stretching toward the window as if afraid to disturb the air. Marian and the children had settled into something resembling normal life. Breakfasts came with laughter again. The children ran through the halls without fear. Marian smiled more often, though the corners of her eyes still carried the memory of winter. I should have been happy. By every measure, the story was over. But endings never feel clean when you've lived them from the inside. They leave stains invisible to everyone else. At night, I sometimes woke thinking I'd heard a door open. Other times I'd dream of the recorder blinking red in the dark, still listening, still saving things I didn't want remembered. One morning, a letter arrived from Hargreaves. Thick paper, official seal. I opened it at the kitchen table while Marian buttered toast for the children. Mrs. Connor, it read, "The court has finalized its decision. Your claim to the property stands. Your son's fraudulent actions are confirmed. The case is closed." I folded the letter and stared at it. "It's over," I said softly. Marian smiled in relief. "That's good news." "Yes," I said, though something inside me hesitated. "It's very good." But when I looked closer, I noticed something odd at the bottom of the page. Beneath the typed signature was a handwritten note in Hargreaves's precise, neat script. "Please visit me. There are details we should discuss in person." That afternoon, I took the bus into the city. Hargreaves's office looked the same as always: books, neat stacks of folders, the faint smell of old paper. He greeted me warmly, but there was a tightness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "You've read the letter," he said. "Yes, you said the case was closed." He nodded slowly. "Legally, yes, but there's something unusual. A final audit was conducted after the investigation. Standard procedure, they said. And," he slid a document across the desk. My name was there, printed neatly. "Property transfer authorization. Date, 2 weeks ago, my signature at the bottom." "I didn't sign this," I said. "I know," he said quietly, "but someone did. It authorizes the sale of your house to a holding company in Zurich." My chest tightened. "You're saying someone's trying again?" He hesitated. "That's what I thought, but then I checked the company. And it doesn't belong to your son. It's registered to someone named Richard Hargreaves." I stared at him. "That's your name?" He exhaled, long and slow. "Yes, it's an old shell company I used to use for trust holdings. Someone revived it without my permission. But they had access to my credentials. They forged my signature too." The words hung between us like smoke. "So someone is using your name to buy my house," I said. "Someone who has access to both of us," he said quietly. I looked down at the page again. The signature wasn't quite right. It leaned too far left, too deliberate. Not my hand, but someone who'd studied it closely. "Who else has copies of your legal records?" I asked. "No one but me," he said. "And you?" The silence after that was so sharp it could have cut glass. I shook my head. "I didn't." "I know," he said quickly. "I don't think you did, but someone close to one of us did. Someone with motive." "Marian," I whispered. He frowned. "You think she had access to my things. She knew everything that happened. She knew how much the house was worth." Hargreaves rubbed his forehead. "It's possible. Or it could be someone from the firm, someone who knew about the case and saw opportunity. Either way, we have to move fast." He opened a folder and began sorting papers. "I can freeze any new transfers, but we'll need proof this time, not just suspicion." I felt a familiar cold settle in my stomach. "Then I'll find it." He looked up sharply. "Olivia, this isn't the same as before. Whoever is doing this isn't acting out of desperation. They're precise, careful, they've studied you." "I've been studied before," I said, "and I'm still here." When I returned home, the house greeted me with silence again, but this time it felt different. Watching, waiting. Marian was upstairs reading to the children. I went straight to my room, opened the closet, and pulled out the small box where I kept my old recorder. It still worked. The battery light glowed faintly green. I set it on the table, pressed record, and spoke quietly. "Day 90. Someone is still inside the story." It wasn't supposed to continue, but it's back. This house doesn't forget. And neither do I. That night I couldn't sleep. Around midnight I heard soft footsteps in the hallway, too slow, too careful to belong to a child. I held my breath, listening. The sound paused outside my door, then moved on toward the stairs. I rose, opened the door slightly, and looked out. Marian stood by the study, holding a folder. Her face was pale in the dim light, her movements deliberate. She opened Luke's old desk drawer, slid something inside, and closed it gently. Then she walked back toward her room without noticing me. I waited until the house was still again, then crossed the hallway. The drawer opened easily. Inside was a single envelope addressed to R. Hargreaves. I pulled it out and held it under the lamp. The handwriting was unmistakable Marian's. My pulse quickened. I slipped the envelope into my pocket, returned to my room, and turned on the recorder again. Day 91. I found the new ghost. The next morning I called Hargreaves. "You need to see something," I said. He met me at the cafe by the station. I handed him the envelope. He read it silently, his brow tightening. "Richard, it's done. The papers are ready. She won't know until it's too late. No signature, no date, just those 2 lines." He exhaled slowly. "So she was working with someone?" I nodded. "But not with Luke." He looked up. "Then who?" I stared out the window at the snow beginning to fall again. "I think," I said, "we're about to find out." That night back in the house, I set the recorder on the table again. I spoke softly, each word measured. Day 92. The first storm was survival. The second will be reckoning. Outside, the wind picked up, sweeping through the garden. The lilac branches tapped against the window like a warning. Inside, I smiled. Because this time, the house wasn't waiting for someone else to save it. It was waiting for me. The next few days felt like living between breaths. Every sound in the house had meaning again. A creak in the hallway, a door that shut too softly. The faint murmur of voices when I stood outside Marian's room late at night. She had begun locking the study. It was Luke's old space, the one I had cleaned and emptied months ago. Now she spent hours there, the door closed, her voice low on the phone. When I asked what she was working on, she smiled, small, practiced, the kind of smile that tells you you've asked the wrong question. "I'm helping with some paperwork," she said, "for the children's school." But the school didn't require phone calls at midnight. On the third night, I waited until the house was asleep. I moved quietly down the hall, the recorder in my hand. The door to the study was locked, as I expected, but locks are like people, they tend to trust familiarity. Luke had used the same key for every interior door. I still had the copy. The lock turned with a small click. Inside, the air was warm and dry. The desk was covered in papers, folders, receipts. I moved carefully, my eyes scanning the pages. Contracts, banking transfers, letters, all stamped with a familiar name, R. Hargreaves Holdings. At the bottom of the stack lay one more sheet, half buried beneath an envelope. I pulled it free and froze. It was a copy of my signature. Dozens of them. Slightly imperfect, slightly different, but close enough to pass. And beside them, Marian's handwriting, short notes, practice lines, comments. The curl too sharp, closer to her real L smaller loop. The realization came slowly, like dawn creeping under a door. She'd been learning to forge me. The floor creaked behind me. I turned. Marian stood in the doorway, robe tied loosely, hair falling over her shoulders. She wasn't surprised to see me. "I thought you'd come," she said. I didn't move. "You could have told me." She sighed and stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Told you what?" "That your lawyer and I had been talking." That after Luke left, someone had to think about what would happen to the rest of us. "Rest of us?" I repeated. She smiled faintly. "You think you're the only one who lost something? I lost a husband, a home, a future. He destroyed everything, but when the dust settled, who still owned the house? Me," I said. "Exactly," she said, her eyes bright. "And yet I'm the one raising 2 children here. You don't need this place, Olivia. You could live anywhere. But this is all I have left." "You could have asked," I said. "I did," she said softly. "You said no." I remembered that conversation, the day she'd hinted about ownership, about security for the children. I had dismissed it, thinking she just needed reassurance. "So you and Hargreaves planned this," I said, her expression flickered. "He approached me first, said he could help me make things right, that you'd never give up control willingly. I didn't know what he planned at first. I just agreed to listen." The anger came not as heat, but as cold clarity. "He used both of us." She shook her head. "He used you, I made my choice." She walked to the desk and picked up one of the forged signatures, holding it between her fingers like an artist admiring her work. "He told me what to practice, what banks to contact. He said if the papers looked right, he could handle the rest. He wanted your house under his company, but I would live here, manage it. He said you wouldn't notice." "Until I did," I said. She smiled sadly. "Until you always do." We stood in silence for a moment, the air heavy between us. Then she said quietly, "You could still walk away. Take what's left, live somewhere else. Let me keep this, please, for the children." "I already gave them everything once," I said. "It cost me my peace. I won't do it again." Her voice hardened. "You can't win against him. You think you're clever, but he's been 2 steps ahead of both of us since the beginning." I looked at her. "You mean he's been recording you too?" That stopped her. Her mouth opened slightly. "What?" I nodded toward the recorder in my hand. "He told me once that truth sets the right fire. He didn't say whose house he meant to burn." The color drained from her face. "You're lying." I pressed play. Static first. Then his voice, calm, deliberate, unmistakable. "She'll do it for you. She trusts you. Once it's signed, she'll think it was her idea. Then the house is ours, not hers." Marian's hand went to her mouth. Her knees buckled slightly as she stumbled back against the desk. "He recorded me," she whispered. "He recorded everyone," I said. "Even me. I think he planned this long before Luke's arrest. Maybe from the start. He knew the house was worth more than either of you imagined. He just needed 2 desperate people to fight over it while he waited." She sank into the chair, staring at the floor. "What are you going to do?" "What I've always done," I said. "Tell the truth." The next morning, I went back to his office. The secretary said he was away on business. No one knew where. His desk was clean, too clean, the drawers empty, the computer gone. When I left, the wind had picked up. I could feel the storm coming again. Back at home, I found Marian packing a bag for the children. "I'm leaving," she said quietly. "I can't stay here anymore." I nodded. "It's better that way." She looked up at me. "You'll be alone again." "I'm used to it," I said. "But I won't be afraid." She hesitated at the door. "He said he'd come back for the papers. If he does..." "I'll be ready," I said. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the recorder in front of me. I pressed the button one last time, day 100. He built the fire, but I still own the match. I stood, went to the study, and opened the window. The wind rushed in, cold and sharp. I set the recorder on the sill, let it catch a few flakes of snow, and pressed play. Hargreaves's voice filled the room once more, steady and cruel, repeating the words he'd spoken to Marian. Then I let the recorder go. It fell into the night, disappearing into the white drift below. In the morning, there was no sign of him. No letters, no calls, just quiet. I sat at the window with my tea, watching sunlight melt the frost from the lilac branches. The garden looked almost the same as it had the day I moved in, but I was not the same woman who'd stepped through that door. The house still stood, solid and stubborn, the only witness that never lied. I opened my notebook one final time. Day 101. The story ends here. Not with forgiveness, not with vengeance, just with understanding. I closed the book. The pages felt warm from my hands. Outside, a new spring wind moved through the branches, scattering the last bits of snow. The house sighed softly around me, and for the first time I understood what it meant. It wasn't grief. It was freedom. Weeks passed before I heard his name again. The days stretched quiet and clean, the kind of peace that almost feels artificial, like music played through thin walls. Marian and the children were gone for good. I had the house to myself, the silence to myself, and for a while I almost believed that was enough. Then one morning, a letter arrived. It had no return address, just my name typed neatly on the front. The paper was thick, the kind that people use when they want their words to feel heavier than they are. I unfolded it slowly. "Olivia," it began, "you've always underestimated me. You thought you could win, that I'd simply disappear. But I built the system you trusted. I know how to live inside other people's paperwork. I don't need your house to own it. I already do. You'll understand soon. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a name." The handwriting was his, Hargreaves's precise, deliberate style, the same hand that had once slid legal documents across polished wood as if they were gifts. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the letter. Outside, the garden moved gently under a soft wind. The lilacs had begun to bloom again. For a moment, everything looked beautiful, even the threat. Later that afternoon, I went into the city. His office was empty now, the glass door covered in dust. A note had been pinned to it by the building manager, property under new lease, no forwarding address, no trace, just absence. At the bank, I asked to check my accounts. The clerk frowned at the screen. "You have 2 accounts listed under your name," she said. "I only have one," I told her. "Not according to this," she said. "Both active, both under Olivia Connor. One here, one in Zurich." I felt my heart slow. "May I see the statements?" She printed them and slid the pages across the counter. One account was mine, the familiar deposits and withdrawals, the steady rhythm of a life rebuilding itself. The other was different, large transfers, unfamiliar transactions, payments to holding companies, some with names I recognized from Luke's old documents. and each page carried my signature. The clerk smiled kindly, unaware of the storm building behind my calm. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Connor?" "Yes," I said softly. "Everything is exactly as it always is." I walked out into the light, the papers folded tightly in my hand. The city sounded distant, muffled by the rush of blood in my ears. For a moment I thought I saw him across the street, a man in a dark coat, tall, moving with that same slow confidence, but when the bus passed, he was gone. That night I couldn't bring myself to turn on the lights. I sat by the window, watching the shadows move. The house creaked, soft but steady, as if whispering to itself. "He's not finished," I said aloud. The house didn't answer, but the sound of the wind through the lilacs felt almost like agreement. I went to the drawer where I had kept the last of my notes, the one place I had promised myself never to touch again. The notebook lay there, closed, patient. I opened to the last page and began to write, Day 120. He doesn't want the house. He wants the story. He wants to live in the version of events where he wins. But I am still writing, and that means he can't. I paused, listening. Somewhere upstairs, a faint sound. A step. Slow, careful. I rose quietly, taking the small flashlight from the counter. The beam of light caught dust in the air, turning it into silver smoke. The stairs groaned under my weight as I climbed. The sound came again, one floorboard near the end of the hallway. The door to Luke's old office stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The room was empty, except for the faint smell of rain and something colder, paper, ink time. On the desk lay a single envelope. I crossed the room and opened it. Inside was a photograph. It showed me, sitting at the same desk, writing in my notebook. The angle was from the corner near the door where the shelf meets the wall. My throat tightened. I turned slowly. In the wall above the shelf was a small dark circle, no larger than a button. A camera lens. He'd been watching. The realization moved through me like a current, cold first, then electric. The system he had built, the records, the signatures, the habits of control, it had never ended. He had simply moved from one stage to another, from the courtroom to the walls. I unplugged the camera, my hands steady. Then I went to the others, the hall, the kitchen, my bedroom. Small, invisible things hidden in corners and light fixtures. Every one of them the same brand, the same quiet design I remembered seeing in his office. By the time I finished, there were 7 cameras on the table, their black eyes lifeless now. I stood over them, breathing hard. "Not this time," I said. The house was quiet again, but it felt awake. The next morning, I took the cameras to the police. They promised to investigate to trace the signal. I didn't expect much. Men like him rarely leave trails that can be followed, but I wanted it on record. Proof. That evening, I returned home and made tea. I stood in the kitchen, the smell of lilacs drifting in through the open window, and for a moment I thought I heard his voice in the wind. "You'll understand soon." I smiled. "I already do." I poured the tea, sat at the table, and opened a new notebook. Day 121, he wanted ownership. He forgot that some things can't be owned. This house has survived every lie told inside it. It will survive him too. I closed the book and looked around. The walls no longer felt haunted. They felt loyal. Outside, the sun slipped lower, the light turning the garden gold. I whispered to the house, "We're almost there." It creaked softly in reply. And for the first time, I realized the house had never belonged to him, or even to me. It had simply been waiting for someone who listened. That night, I slept without fear. Morning came softly, filtered through curtains that glowed pale gold. The world outside was still damp from the night's rain, and the air carried that scent of clean beginnings that always follows a storm. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea, the notebook open in front of me, the words from last night still drying on the page. For the first time in years, I felt calm in a way that wasn't pretending. The police had promised to trace the signal from the cameras. I didn't expect them to find much, but the act of handing over the devices had felt like removing splinters from the house itself. Every hole I had patched in the wall seemed to breathe easier now. Every creak of the floor sounded less like warning and more like memory. At 9, the phone rang. I hadn't heard it in days. The sound startled me. When I lifted the receiver, no one spoke at first. I waited, breathing quietly, until a voice finally came through. "Mrs. Connor?" "Yes. This is Detective Farrow from the city precinct. We've received confirmation from the technical unit about those devices you brought in." "What did they find?" He hesitated. "The cameras were transmitting to an encrypted server local, but when we checked the IP routing, the address didn't lead outside Geneva." "So he's still here," I said. "Possibly. But there's more. The server wasn't rented under Hargreaves's name." "Whose then?" A pause. "Yours." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "That's impossible," I said. "We thought so too. but the records show the account was opened 6 months ago using your identification and your bank details. Whoever set it up had access to your personal documents. My hand tightened on the receiver. What are you saying? I'm saying someone went to great lengths to make it look like you were watching yourself. For a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing. Then I thanked him, hung up, and sat very still. The house felt heavier again, not dangerous, but knowing, as if it was trying to tell me something it hadn't before. I went to the study, the same room where everything had started. The sunlight fell across the desk, touching the notebook, the empty cup, the faint marks left by all the papers that had once cluttered its surface. I opened the top drawer, half expecting to find another camera, another letter, another echo of him. But instead, I found something I didn't recognize, a small silver key. I turned it in my hand. There was an engraving on the side, 3 letters, RHH. My pulse slowed. Richard Hargreaves Holdings. I searched the rest of the drawer. Beneath the false bottom, a space I hadn't noticed before, was a small black notebook, thinner than mine, the cover unmarked. I opened it carefully. Every page was written in his hand. Dates, transactions, notes about meetings, my name appearing again and again, always connected to the word transfer. But the last entry caught my breath. Day 0, if she ever finds this, it means I succeeded. Ownership is only perception. The law believes the paper believes the name, and now the name is hers. The words blurred slightly as my eyes watered. I read the next line twice before I could accept it. I gave her the house because I couldn't keep it. The moment she bought it, I moved in not as a man but as the idea that built it. The system lives through her now. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The room felt both full and empty at once. I whispered to the air, "What did you do?" There was no answer, of course. Only the faint hum of the house breathing. I flipped the page. She will think she's free when she writes that she is. She will believe peace is hers. That belief is the only ownership that matters. I envy her for it. I closed the book slowly. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From understanding, he hadn't needed to stay. He'd built something self-sustaining, a ghost of control disguised as inheritance. The cameras, the accounts, the forged records, they weren't just ways to watch me. They were ways to teach me how to live inside his system, how to keep it alive. And yet, as I sat there, another thought began to form, a quiet, defiant thought. If he'd built me into the structure, then I could rewrite the structure from within. I took my pen and opened my notebook again, pressing hard into the paper. Day 150. He made the house a reflection. But reflections change when the light does. I am the light now. That sentence steadied me. I stood, took the black notebook, and carried it to the fireplace. The flames caught quickly, hungry for paper. The ink turned black, then gray, then nothing. When it was gone, I felt the air shift, lighter again. As the fire died, I whispered, "Now it's mine." Outside, the clouds were moving fast across the lake. The wind pressed against the windows, not in warning this time, but in applause. The house didn't creak, it exhaled. That evening, I went room by room, touching each wall, each door frame, each piece of furniture. I told them silently, "We're done being haunted." When I reached the front door, I stopped. A letter had been slipped underneath. Plain envelope, no handwriting on the front. I opened it. Inside was a single page. Then make it worth owning. No signature. No trace of where it came from. I smiled, folded the page, and placed it in the fire. The flames took it easily, as if they'd been waiting for it too. Back in the kitchen, I poured myself another cup of tea and sat by the window. The lilacs were blooming brighter than ever, their scent spilling into the room. The lake reflected the last light of the sun, gold turning to blue. I opened my notebook one last time. Day 151. He wanted the house to remember him, but it remembers me now. And I think that's enough. I closed it, set it aside, and leaned back in the chair. The world outside was finally quiet, not empty but complete. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. Maybe freedom isn't escaping the story. Maybe it's learning how to finish it yourself. The clock ticked once softly, and the house at last was still. I woke to the sound of rain, not the angry kind that beats against the roof, but the slow, thoughtful kind that sounds like it's remembering something. The lake outside was veiled in mist, soft gray swallowing the horizon. It took me a moment to realize what day it was. 1 year since I bought the house. The date didn't strike me at first, but the air had that strange, circular weight, the feeling of time folding back on itself. I sat up, brushed the sleep from my eyes, and looked around my room. Everything was in its place, calm and ordinary. And yet, something beneath the surface hummed faintly, like the last note of a song that never quite ends. I went downstairs and brewed tea, the motion automatic now. When I turned to reach for the sugar, I noticed something unusual on the counter, a small envelope, white, clean, no stamp, no address. The kind of thing that doesn't arrive but simply appears. I didn't open it right away. I sat with my tea first, watching the steam curl toward the ceiling, as if testing the air for secrets. When it cooled, I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the house taken from the street. My house. But the picture was old, years old, judging by the ivy crawling higher than it does now. In the window, faintly, there was a figure. A woman looking out. The silhouette was unmistakable. It was me, except it couldn't be. I turned the photo over. Written in neat handwriting on the back were 4 words: before you moved in. The teacup slipped slightly in my hand, spilling warmth across my palm. I didn't even feel it. I just kept staring at the photograph. The date at the bottom confirmed it, taken 3 months before I bought the house, before my name had ever been on the deed. I stood up slowly, the room spinning just enough to make me reach for the counter. My mind raced through possibilities: mistake, coincidence, some trick by Hargreaves, another ghost of his manipulation, but the face in the window wasn't a trick. It was too familiar. The tilt of the head, the shape of the shoulders, it was me. The rain pressed harder now, as though the sky wanted to drown out thought. I walked to the study and opened the drawer where I had burned the black notebook. The ashes were gone. I had swept them away months ago. But the drawer smelled faintly of smoke still, and as I leaned closer, I saw something I hadn't before: faint markings, like writing pressed into the wood from a heavy hand. I ran my fingers across it. Letters emerged under the light. The first owner always comes back. I whispered, "What does that mean?" The house didn't answer. Just creaked softly, as though stretching in its sleep. I spent the rest of the day searching. Old property records, legal documents, bank transfers, anything that might show me the chain of ownership before me. The name on the deed before mine was familiar. Too familiar. Olivia Connor. I blinked. The letters didn't rearrange. They didn't fade. It was my name, clear as print, dated 8 years before I'd ever set foot in this country. I called the records office. My voice trembled only slightly. "There must be a mistake," I said. The woman on the other end checked twice. "No mistake, Mrs. Connor. The property was previously owned by someone of your name, perhaps a relative?" "No," I said softly. "Not that I know of." "Well," she said, cheerful in the way bureaucrats can be about mysteries that aren't theirs, "that's quite the coincidence, isn't it?" "Yes," I said. "Quite." After I hung up, I stood in the middle of the living room and looked around. Every surface, every shadow seemed to watch me back. Coincidence had never been part of this story. That night, I didn't light the lamps. I let the rain be the only sound. The windows reflected my face, but sometimes when I moved, the reflection didn't. It lingered half a second longer, smiling faintly before following. I whispered to the glass, "Who are you?" And somewhere deep within the house, a door creaked open. I froze. The sound had come from upstairs, from the attic, a place I hadn't entered since moving in. I took a candle and climbed the narrow staircase, the flame trembling against the walls. The air grew colder with each step, the scent of dust thick enough to taste. The door to the attic was already ajar. I pushed it open gently. The candlelight found shapes, covered furniture, boxes stacked against the wall, old sheets yellowed by time. And in the center of the room, a single chair. On it lay another photograph. I picked it up. This one was clearer. It showed a woman sitting in that same chair, wearing the same robe I wore every morning. Her head turned slightly toward the window, her expression soft, thoughtful. It was me again. But the back of this photo had a different message. "You always were the house." The candle shook in my hand, the wax spilling onto my fingers. I didn't flinch. I just stared at those words until the letters blurred into one another. My breath came out in fog, though the air wasn't that cold. Then I understood. It wasn't that I had bought the house. The house had bought me. Every name on the deed, every line of ownership, every signature, it was part of a pattern, a cycle. Each owner thought they were taking possession. Each was chosen instead. The walls, the floors, the lilacs by the window, they remembered. They rewrote. They became the people who tried to own them. I dropped the photograph and it landed face up on the floor. The woman in the picture seemed to look right at me. The candle flickered low. I whispered, "Then who was before me?" A draft moved through the room. The candle went out. For a moment, there was only dark. And then, just beneath the sound of the rain, I heard it, the faintest whisper, close to my ear in a voice that might have been my own. "Before you, there was me." I stumbled back, heart pounding, and the door swung shut behind me. The house groaned softly, almost tenderly. And downstairs, the clock struck midnight. Each chime echoed through the floorboards, through my ribs, through the quiet spaces in my mind. The house was awake again. And this time it was speaking my language. The storm lasted all night. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The walls seemed to breathe in rhythm with the rain, slow and patient, as though they knew I wasn't going anywhere. By dawn, the air had gone still again. The silence was heavy, not peaceful, like a held breath waiting to see what I'd do next. I sat at the kitchen table with a candle still burning beside me. The photographs lay spread across the surface like evidence of a crime I didn't remember committing. My face stared back at me from every one of them, sometimes older, sometimes younger, but always me. And in the corner of each photograph, faint and nearly hidden by shadow, was the same mark, a tiny carving in the doorframe, the shape of an eye. I hadn't noticed it before. I stood and walked to the living room. The morning light caught on the wooden frame beside the stairs, and there it was, the carving, small, subtle, like something that had always been there. I traced it with my finger. The wood felt warmer than it should have. When I pressed harder, the surface shifted. A small panel clicked open, revealing a hollow space inside the wall. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was mine. "If you are reading this, then the house has chosen again." I stopped breathing. The ink was old, faded, but unmistakable. I read on, "You will believe you bought it. You will believe you came here because you wanted peace, a fresh start, a place to forget. That's how it always begins. But this house doesn't take by force, it waits until you ask for it. You must never sign another paper, never answer a letter, never open the attic again. The moment you do, it will start over." At the bottom, there was a single word written in darker ink, as though added later. "Run." I folded the paper slowly, my hands trembling. I didn't remember writing it, but I remembered the handwriting. I remembered the pressure of that pen, the angle of the letters. My mind raced back to every document, every signature, every time I'd written my name on anything in this house. What if each one wasn't a statement of ownership, but a contract? The air in the room thickened, pressing against my skin. I turned slowly toward the window. The reflection there wasn't moving with me anymore. She smiled softly, knowingly. "Who are you?" I whispered. Her lips moved, but I didn't hear sound, only the faint echo of rain against glass. Then she mouthed the words, "You wrote me." I stumbled back, hitting the edge of the table. The photographs fluttered to the floor, their faces catching the light like tiny mirrors. Every reflection in the glass, in the kettle, in the window, they all moved now, each one a fraction too slow, each one smiling. I grabbed my coat and ran. The front door swung open easily, the wind cold and sharp as it hit my face. The lake shimmered pale under a sky clearing from the storm. I didn't stop running until I reached the road. The village was waking up. Cars passed. A man walked his dog. Life moved on untouched. I tried to speak, to call for help, but the words wouldn't come out right. My name, stuck in my throat like something too large to swallow. I caught my reflection in a shop window across the street. I froze. The woman looking back wasn't me. Her eyes were the same, but older, the same smile, but deeper. She lifted her hand and pressed it to the glass. I didn't. And then she whispered, faint but clear, through the barrier of the world, "You should have run sooner." I stepped back, shaking my head. The air seemed to bend around me, the sound of the street fading until all that remained was the soft, steady rhythm of the house, its heartbeat still pulsing in my ears. When I turned, the road behind me was gone. In its place stood the house again. It shouldn't have been there. I had run miles, but it stood where the street had been, calm and waiting, lilacs blooming in impossible winter light. The front door opened on its own. I didn't move. I just stood there, the letter still clutched in my hand, my breath fogging the air. "Please," I whispered. "Let me go." From the doorway came a sound, a voice layered over my own, soft and echoing, like many women speaking in unison. "You already did." The wind swept through me then, and for a second I thought I saw them, shapes in the windows, faces in the mirrors, each one mine but not. All of them smiling that same faint smile. The light shifted. The world tilted. And then I was standing back inside, the kettle humming softly, the notebook open on the table. The page was blank except for one line. Day 1. The new owner has arrived. I looked down at my hand. The pen was already there. Somewhere deep in the walls, I heard the faint sound of laughter, warm, welcoming, endless. The house had chosen again. And this time I wasn't leaving. The rain finally left and spring settled over the lake like a soft hand. Mornings came pale and gentle, evenings came gold and long. The lilacs learned my name and I learned theirs. The house breathed evenly now, a steady rhythm that matched the rise and fall of my chest. When I spoke, the walls did not answer with fear. They answered with memory. I keep the kettle clean. I open the windows when the sun is kind. I touch each doorframe as I move through the rooms, the way one greets old friends. The carvings are still there, small eyes in the wood, watching without malice. Sometimes I press my thumb to them and feel a warmth come back, as if the house has a pulse and it is letting me borrow it. On quiet days I write. Not to prove anything now, to remember gently. The notebook is almost full again, but the handwriting looks calmer, as if the words themselves have agreed to stop shouting. I sign my name at the end of each page and wait for the old panic to rise. It does not. Ownership is not a word in the house's language anymore. Belonging is closer. So is witness. When the village wakes, I watch from the garden. The baker wipes flour from his hands onto a white apron. A child in a red coat drags a stick across the fence, turning the morning into a slow instrument. A dog leaves perfect ovals in the damp earth and looks very proud of this. The world goes on. The house allows it. I have come to understand that permission is its kindest gift. There are still letters sometimes. White envelopes slipped under the door with no stamps, no marks. I open them and find only a single word written in a careful hand. Stay. Breathe. Listen. Once the word was home. I put that one in a frame and leaned it against the kitchen window. The glass carries it across the room at noon, sunlight making the letters brighter than ink. I am not afraid of the mirrors now. They all learned my face and I learned theirs. When I pass the hallway, 10 versions of me pass too, each one a fraction behind, each one smiling. I used to fear the delay, the sense that some part of me would always be catching up. Now I take comfort in it. A person is a chorus if she lives long enough. A house is a choir that never stops learning the song. People do come. The house calls softly, never the same way twice. A young couple pauses at the gate and takes in the view. An older man sets down his suitcase on the gravel and looks up at the windows with a recognition he cannot name. Once a woman with a scarf around her hair walked past 3 times in a single afternoon, each time closer, each time slower, until she finally stood at the lilacs and put her hand on the bark as if asking permission to grieve. I opened the door for her without being asked. She did not come in. She thanked the air and left. For a while I wondered if I would know the next owner when the house chose. I thought there might be a trumpet somewhere, or a bell no one else could hear. There was no ceremony. Only a morning that felt whiter than usual, only a light that arrived earlier than the sun. She came with 2 bags and a careful step. Her shoes were city shoes, her coat the wrong weight for the lake. She stood at the threshold and looked not at the rooms but at the corners, as if she already understood that the corners hold the truth. She knocked without touching the door and said quietly to the wood, please. I did not speak out loud. I let the hinges answer her with a soft hello. She crossed the entry and paused under the arch, and I could feel the way her breath changed. She was listening, not to me, to us. She walked the perimeter the way I had done the first week, fingers trailing along the plaster, the banister, the carved eyes. She stopped at the kitchen and closed her eyes when the kettle clicked, and I liked her for that. She put her bags down in the study without opening them. The house accepted the weight as if recognizing an old pattern in a new hand. We sat on the floor that afternoon, 2 women sharing silence and a pot of tea. She did not ask questions. She let her gaze touch each surface and then return to the window. When she finally spoke, her voice was not timid or bright. It was ordinary in the best way. I can stay, she said, if you will have me. We will, I thought, and the pipes in the wall answered with a small, friendly sigh. The wind lifted the curtain and folded sunlight over her shoulder. She smiled without surprise, as if this was the exact kind of miracle she believed in. At dusk, she took out a notebook. Not a large one, not new. The cover showed a faint ring where a mug had once rested. She dated the page. She wrote a single sentence. She paused, as if listening to see if the house approved. Then she continued. I watched the line of the pen move, steady and sure. I did not lean close. I did not try to read. It is not my work now to test the handwriting of those who come here. The house does not require guardians the way it used to. It requires company. It requires someone who will open windows and allow the wind to be honest. Night came the way it always does, on soft feet with a talent for closing doors kindly. I showed her the room that sleeps best, the one with the wall that holds sunlight even in winter. I told her with my footsteps that the floorboards forgive mistakes and that the stairs do not like to be hurried. She laughed once, a small laugh shaped like gratitude, and the sound went up into the rafters where it would live a long, happy time. I do not think of Hargreaves much. The house released him the way storms release ships that insist on sailing the wrong direction. Perhaps he found other rooms to write into. Perhaps he finally ran out of paper. The system he built still visits like weather sometimes, but it no longer rearranges the furniture without asking. If a letter arrives, I read it with the same attention I give to the wind. Then I decide whether to close the window. On the first night of the new owner's first spring, I took my pen and opened my notebook to the last blank page. I did not write a warning. I did not write a rule. I wrote a welcome. Then I left the page open on the kitchen table where the moon could read it over my shoulder. The next morning, she found it. She smiled and placed her own notebook beside mine, two spines resting against each other like hands almost touching. She brewed tea without asking which tin to use. She set 2 cups down. She said good morning to the empty room and waited for it to say it back. It did. If you ask me what freedom feels like now, I will tell you it feels like this. A door that stays unlocked because you trust the air, a window that opens to lilacs that do not apologize for thriving, a table steady enough to hold 2 notebooks and the smaller book inside every house that never gets written but is always read. The house did not swallow me. It learned me. I did not escape it. I finished it. And in finishing it, I made room for someone who needed a beginning. Sometimes, very late, I hear the older versions of my voice move softly through the hall. They do not warn, they hum, they know the song by heart. The new owner sleeps and does not wake. The lake turns in its sleep and becomes the sky for a moment. The lilacs count blossoms with a satisfaction that feels almost like prayer. I take one last walk through the rooms before I sleep. I press my thumb to each carved eye. Warmth answers. Presence answers. Not ownership. Not now, not ever again. Before I blow out the candle, I write one more line in the margin where there is barely space left. Stay, breathe, listen. The flame goes small, then smaller, then gone. In the perfect dark, the house holds the shape of my breath a second longer and lets it go. Morning will come. The kettle will click. The window will brighten. Someone downstairs will say good morning, and the walls will answer with a softness that is older than language and still learning how to be kind. That is enough.